To all who come to this happy place, welcome.
Now, I hope you guys are ready to blast off because we are hitting the ground running with another Disney theory today. And it just so happens to take place in a land that I'm not sure you guys were expecting. Well, I mean, you could probably guess by the title of this video, but it's in Tomorrowland. It's Space Mountain. I mean, come on, you guys knew that already. It's Space Mountain. Now, I'm sure when we all get on Space Mountain, our first thought is, wow, this is gonna be a really fun roller coaster in the dark. And the fact that it has totally awesome music playing in the background doesn't hurt either. On the other hand, your first thought is probably not, wow, I wonder what this space station is doing here in Tomorrowland, or what the purpose of this space station or Space Mountain looking building is. But everybody, guess what? I have fantastic news. That's exactly what we're going to be talking about today, the hidden story behind Space Mountain. Now, at first glance, the story might be pretty self-explanatory. We're all astronauts and we're going out on a mission into space and we're going to go ride our rocket around the cosmos, but there's a little bit more to the story than just that. That's because today I'm not only just including the Disneyland Space Mountain, but also the Disney World Space Mountain Mission 2 in Paris, and also Space Mountain Ghost Galaxy. These versions of the attractions are what I call the Space Mountain canon. I, however, will not be including Hyperspace Mountain or Rockin' Space Mountain in the canon. This is because Hyperspace Mountain takes place in the Star Wars universe instead of the Disney Parks ride universe, and Rockin' Space Mountain is just kind of a music overlay. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's talk story. Now, to understand the Space Mountain timeline and how each attraction fits together and what time they take place, we need to talk about the buildings themselves. Each physical building of Space Mountain, you know, the big white pointy building you see at the very end of the pathway when you're walking down Tomorrowland, those are space stations. More specifically though, the one at Disneyland is called Space Station 77, and the one at Walt Disney World is called Starport 75. Now, yes, I know that these are just clever references to the opening year of these attractions, but on the story side of everything, it kind of makes sense that these are their designations. Now I believe it's time for us to designate the difference between a space station and a starport. When it comes to Starport 75, just replace the word star with the word air, and you've got a pretty good idea of what a starport is. Basically, it's where space tourists come and they get their rockets and they blast off into space just for fun. You know, it's a starport where a bunch of different people, possibly even aliens, intermingle and get on their respective transportation rockets. Even the sign that you guys see here is phrased more like an advertisement and less like a mission statement. Welcome, space travelers, to Starport 75, your gateway to the galaxies. This would also explain why in the queue of Space Mountain there are little different mini games for people to play while they wait in line, and there are also little holographic projections of children flying around and around in a rocket. It's because we're all tourists waiting in line for our turn to get on our rocket ship and travel across the galaxy. Now that we've talked about Walt Disney World's version of Space Mountain, let's shift our focus for a little bit over to Disneyland's version of Space Mountain. As we discussed before, instead of being called Starport 75, it's called Space Station 77. This is again a nod to the year the ride opened at Disneyland. Now, I would assume a space station and a starport would have two very different jobs in this galactic world we're talking about. Whereas a starport is open to the public and allows them to travel at their leisure across the galaxy, a space station is probably more privately owned. Perhaps by a private company, or maybe even by a giant space government or federation. Now, I'm not quite sure how this ties into the story, but notice there are 4 separate Space Mountain buildings on the outside, and 1 Space Mountain building on the inside of these 4 others. This makes for a total of 5 different Space Mountain-like buildings that make up Space Station 77. Now, can you guess how many different Space Mountains exist all over the globe in different Disney parks? Yeah, you guessed right. It's 5 different Space Mountains! It's all making sense now. Now, this photo could be showing the 5 different Space Mountains linked together to show some sort of superstation, or all of the stations could be linked together right now in this photo, but Space Station 77 is just one of the smaller buildings, one of the 4 on the outside, which is what I think is happening. Now, is all this talk about space mountains and spaceports and space stations and star stations and spaceports making you really, really confused? I don't blame you. Let's take a break from the actual physical structures and how they fit into the storyline, and let's talk about the storyline when you're actually in and riding the attraction for a second. Now, most of these story details are from JimHillMedia.com. I will link it in the description below, but he had access to a Disneyland Rarities CD where different, more hard-to-find audio clips from Disneyland's history were stored. On this CD was a Space Mountain preview clip from 1976. The clip said, and I quote, "You and your fellow astronauts board rocket cars on a space station launching platform orbiting high above the Earth. As your journey begins, you'll race through a vast man-made solar field, energizing your rocket car for its dazzling plunge into superspace. Hold on tight, you're on your way as you blast off into the void of the universe. Sweeping around the giant glowing geodesic laser satellite, you become engulfed in a spectacular spiral nebula with flashing comets and a whirling galaxy. This is superspace penetration." Skipping ahead a few lines, it says, "Ascending the launch portal, amazed at the starry vista of the cosmos overhead, blasting off on a breathtaking super fast race through outer space. Your body is actually experiencing the force of G zooming down the re-entry portal, feeling the blast of hot air and rocked by a sonic boom. Yes, you will experience what is truly the ultimate thrill ride attraction. So climb aboard, fasten your seatbelt, and prepare to blast off when Space Mountain opens in June 1977 in Tomorrowland." So everybody, there you have it. That is our basic mission outlined for the Disneyland version of Space Mountain. The space station, Space Station 77 more specifically, is orbiting high above the Earth. In this little description, different scenes in the attraction are explained away. As your journey begins, you'll race through a vast man-made solar field, energizing your rocket car for its dazzling plunge into outer space. This scene is represented by the blue, what I like to call Stargate scene, where you're going down the hallway and it's kind of energizing the star car for your journey. Oh, pardon me, rocket car. Just call it a rocket, man. That's what it is. After the blue hallway scene, you enter the first lift hill. This is what the audio refers to as superspace penetration. You sweep around the giant glowing geodesic laser satellite and become engulfed in a spectacular spiral nebula with flashing comets and a whirling galaxy. It's very descriptive, Disney. Good job. So now we've just about covered it. In Walt Disney World Space Mountain, you're a space tourist blasting out to enjoy your vacation in the cosmos, whereas Disneyland Space Mountain, you're more of a space explorer blasting off to see the universe, which can kind of explain the tonal differences between the two parks. I mean, in Disneyland, you're a little bit more militaristic, more futuristic looking queue. Heck, you even got a ship in the main loading bay. Whereas in Walt Disney World, the queue is a little bit more sleek and a little bit more family-friendly, Tron-esque if you will, because it's aimed at the tourists. So now we have officially covered both Starport 75 and Space Station 77, but you're probably asking yourself, what about 76? Did they just skip the number 76 altogether? My friends, allow me to introduce you to Space Mountain Mission 2 at Disneyland Paris. Now, of course, Space Mountain Mission 2 looks a little bit different than its other two counterparts in the United States, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't take place within the same universe. Space Mountain Mission 2 is a bit different from the other two Space Mountains because instead of exploring the galaxy, we explore the very edges of the universe, which would probably be the best way to explain the different look of the Space Mountain show building. It's gotta be bigger because you're gonna launch someone to the edge of the universe instead of just across the galaxy. It would also explain why you go a lot faster and around some loop-de-loops in that version of Space Mountain. It's a little bit more of an intense journey than just hopping across the Milky Way. And that, my friends, is why Space Mountain Mission 2 is called Space Mountain Mission 2. The Space Mountain in Disneyland Paris is our long-fabled Space Station 76. But why do I say Space Station and not Starport? Well, I mean, come on, you're not gonna send tourists on a journey to the edge of the universe. That's lots of liability. Instead, it's going to be a privately owned company or the government sending specially trained astronauts into space. That's my theory anyway. But no, I'm not stopping there. I'm going to take it even a step further and talk about the most recent development in the Space Mountain storyline, Ghost Galaxy. Now, for the Halloween times, they changed Space Mountain to be super spooky and to fit in with the spirit of the season. The projections on the outside of the Space Mountain show building show that something inside is going very, very wrong. The Space Mountain building itself crumbles and rebuilds itself. Something on the inside tries to claw its way out, and a sonar detects multiple pings of something on the inside of the building. When you, as the space traveler, enter the building, you notice that something is indeed wrong. The building is dimly lit, and there is something going on one of the planets. The monitor at the front of the loading bay that usually shows footage of space travel now shows footage of a single planet in space being covered by a toxic green storm, before it cuts out and the signal is lost. When you embark on your mission, which I would assume is to figure out what's going on that planet and what that storm is, everything goes wrong. Your car is being chased by a giant ghost galaxy, or a ghost-shaped nebula. Now, I know it's easy to write this off as a ghost because it's called Ghost Galaxy and it looks pretty spooky, so, must be a ghost, but that is where you're wrong. Now, while ghosts do exist in the Disney park attraction universe, I don't think that this is a ghost. Now, what else could this be if it's not a ghost? Simple, it's an alien. Some previously unknown species of alien is colonizing that planet we see at the very beginning, hence the green storm, and that alien that attacks us during the mission is just one of them. Fortunately, we do escape the ghost, alien, nebula-looking thing and make it safely back to the space station. And well, that's about it. I think we're all caught up on the story of Space Mountain. Now please keep in mind that this is all hypothetical and it's just me trying to make sense of the different Space Mountain attractions and how they tie into the overall story of Tomorrowland and the wider array of Disney theme parks. So what do you guys think of this theory? Do you think there's anything I should have added, anything that I left out or missed? Make sure to let me know down in the comments below. I'll take a look at them and see if I can improve this video in the future. Maybe make another once we have more story details. So in chronological order, the story of Space Mountain, we have Space Mountain, Walt Disney World, Space Mountain Mission 2, Space Mountain at Disneyland, and lastly, Space Mountain Ghost Galaxy. So just remember, even if there's not a story being told to you right up in your face, you're at a Disney park, so odds are there is a story somewhere. All you have to do is look for it. And also, pull up on that lap bar for me, please. Make sure it's secure. Hello everybody, and thank you all so much for watching this theory video, this time on Space Mountain. I hope you all enjoyed it. It took me a little bit of researching, but I really had a great time making this. We really needed another theory, and I think Space Mountain was the perfect attraction to craft a theory around. Just a reminder for those of you who may be interested or who may be in the area, I will be at Disneyland April 17th through the 20th, so make sure if you see me in the parks to say hi, or if you want to take a picture, that's fine too. I won't judge you. Be sure to follow me on Twitter if you guys would like more updates regarding this trip or regarding the channel. I post there very often and you can find some awesome stuff to read there. Also, if you feel so inclined, make sure to stop by my Patreon if you want to support me and help support the channel. Even just $1 a month really goes a long way. Also, don't forget that Offhand Disney merch is available now. The link for that will also be down in the description below. We have 4 designs you can choose from. All of them, I think, are absolutely wonderful. And lastly, please be sure to hit that bell button next to subscribe. I know it's a little inconsequential, but it really helps me a lot because, you know, YouTube is kind of messing with some creators, so we'll see how this does. Maybe I shouldn't say the Y word in my YouTube videos from now on. Anyways, everybody, thank you all so very much for watching. I will see you all in Disneyland April 17th through the 20th. Goodbye.